September 3rd, 1260 AD, Ain Jalut, Palestine. For 40 years, the Mongol Empire had been unstoppable. They conquered from China to Europe. Every army they faced was destroyed. Every city that resisted was burned to ashes, with every man, woman, and child killed. Baghdad, the greatest city in the Islamic world, had fallen. 1 million Muslims slaughtered. Damascus surrendered without a fight. Cairo was next. The Islamic world was facing extinction, but 20,000 Mamluk warriors refused to surrender. On this day, they would do what seemed impossible: stop the Mongols and save Islamic civilization. This is the Battle of Ain Jalut, the battle that changed history. The Mongols weren't just an army, they were a force of nature that destroyed everything in their path. Under Genghis Khan and his descendants, they built the largest land empire in history. They perfected a system of total war: surrender immediately and live as slaves, or resist and every single person dies. Cities that surrendered were stripped of wealth but left standing. Cities that resisted were erased. When the Mongols took Nishapur in Persia, they killed every living thing, even the cats and dogs, then built pyramids from the skulls. In 1258, Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, destroyed Baghdad. For 500 years, Baghdad had been the center of Islamic learning, art, and culture. The Mongols threw so many books into the Tigris River that the water turned black from ink. They killed the caliph by wrapping him in a carpet and trampling him with horses. 1 million people died in Baghdad. The Islamic world was in shock. If Baghdad could fall, nowhere was safe. The Mongols sent a message to the Mamluk Sultan in Egypt: surrender or face total destruction. Most people expected Egypt to surrender. Fighting the Mongols was suicide. But the Mamluks were different. They were not born into nobility. They were slaves, trained from childhood to be warriors. They had nothing to lose and everything to prove. And they had a leader who refused to bow. Sultan Qutuz had seized power in Egypt just months before. He wasn't the legitimate ruler. He was a former slave who took the throne by force when the previous sultan proved too weak to face the Mongols. Qutuz had personal reasons to hate the Mongols. He was born a prince in Central Asia, but the Mongols destroyed his homeland when he was a child, killed his family, and sold him into slavery. He had arisen through the Mamluk ranks through pure skill and determination. Now he had a chance for revenge. When Hulagu Khan's ambassadors arrived demanding Egypt's surrender, Qutuz faced a choice: surrender and live, fight and probably die. His advisors begged him to surrender. The Mongols had never lost. Fighting them was insane. Qutuz's response was to execute the Mongol ambassadors and display their heads on the gates of Cairo. This was a declaration of war. There was no turning back. Egypt would fight. Qutuz knew he couldn't win defending Cairo. Cities couldn't stop the Mongols. He needed to meet them in open battle, on ground of his choosing. He needed a miracle. But first, he needed to unite Egypt's fractious Mamluk grandeurs. The most dangerous was Baibars. Baibars was the finest general in the Mamluk army, but he and Qutuz hated each other. Baibars believed he should be sultan, not Qutuz, but both men knew they needed each other to survive. They made a temporary alliance. After the Mongols were defeated, if they were, they could settle their rivalry. First, they had to survive. In early 1260, Hulagu Khan received devastating news. The great Khan Möngke had died in China. This meant there would be a succession struggle. Hulagu had to return to Mongolia to protect his interests. He couldn't stay in Syria. Hulagu made a fateful decision. He would take most of his army back east, leaving only about 20,000 soldiers under his general Kitbuka to hold Syria and conquer Egypt. Qutuz was an experienced commander and a Christian, which made him eager to destroy the Muslim Mamluks. But 20,000 Mongols were not the same as the massive horde Hulagu commanded. For the first time, the Mongols would face a Mamluk army that wasn't overwhelmingly superior in numbers. Qutuz saw his chance. He marched his army of about 20,000 Mamluks north into Palestine. The two armies were roughly equal in size. The battle would be decided by tactics, courage, and will. On September 3, 1260 AD, the two armies met at Ain Jalut, the spring of Goliath, in the Jezreel Valley in Palestine. The Mongols were confident. They had never lost a major battle. Their composite bows could fire arrows accurately at 200 yards while riding at full gallop. Their tactics were flawless, perfected through decades of conquest. They expected to crush the Mamluks like every other army they faced. But Qutuz knew the Mongol tactics, and he had a plan. Qutuz placed his main army hidden in the hills around Ain Jalut. He sent forward only a small vanguard under Baibars to engage the Mongols. This was the bait. When the Mongols saw Baibars' small force, they charged forward eagerly. This was their standard tactic: use their superior archery and mobility to destroy the enemy vanguard, then roll up the main army. Baibars' men fought fiercely, then began a staged retreat. The Mongols, sensing victory, pursued them deeper into the valley. This was exactly what Qutuz wanted. As the Mongols pursued Baibars into the valley, Qutuz sprang his trap. The hidden Mamluk forces attacked from both sides. The Mongols suddenly found themselves surrounded and outnumbered. But the Mongols didn't panic. They were the best warriors in the world. They formed defensive circles and began firing their deadly arrows. The battle descended into brutal hand-to-hand combat. For hours, the two sides fought without either gaining advantage. Then Qutuz, the Mongol commander, made a mistake. Seeing his forces pressured, he committed his reserve cavalry to break through the Mamluk lines. For a moment, it seemed to work. The Mongol charge broke through, and Mamluk soldiers began to flee. The battle was turning. If the Mamluks broke, the rout would be total. Qutuz saw disaster approaching. At the critical moment, Sultan Qutuz did something extraordinary. He threw off his helmet so his soldiers could see his face. He rode to the front lines, shouting, "Wa Islamah! Oh, my Islam!" He wasn't asking his men to fight for him or for Egypt. He was calling them to fight for their faith, their families, and their civilization. Everything depended on this moment. His men rallied. The fleeing soldiers stopped and turned back. Fresh Mamluk cavalry charged into the Mongol breakthrough. The momentum shifted. Baibars, leading from the front, personally led the counterattack that shattered the Mongol center. Qutuz, the Mongol commander, was surrounded and killed fighting to the end. With their commander dead, the Mongol army finally broke. For the first time in 40 years, the Mongols were running. The Mamluks pursued them for miles, cutting down fleeing soldiers. By sunset, the Mongol army was destroyed. The impossible had happened. The Mongols had been defeated. The Battle of Ain Jalut changed everything. The Mongol advance into the Middle East stopped permanently. They never seriously threatened Egypt again. The Islamic world was saved. Damascus, which had surrendered to the Mongols, now welcomed the Mamluks as liberators. Syria and Palestine came under Mamluk control. The Mamluk Sultanate would rule Egypt and Syria for the next 250 years. But the story had a tragic ending. Just weeks after the victory, Baibars assassinated Qutuz during the journey back to Cairo. Baibars claimed Qutuz had promised him Syria, but refused to give it to him. Baibars became the new sultan. Qutuz had saved Islamic civilization, but didn't live to enjoy it. He was buried in a simple grave, far from the glory he deserved. Baibars went on to become one of the greatest sultans in Islamic history, but his legacy is forever tainted by the murder of the man who made his rise possible. The Battle of Ain Jalut proved that the Mongols could be beaten. It broke the myth of Mongol invincibility. After Ain Jalut, other nations found the courage to resist. The battle saved Islamic civilization at its darkest hour. If Egypt had fallen, there would be no major Islamic power left. The entire Islamic world might have been conquered or destroyed. The Mamluks showed that courage, faith, and brilliant tactics could overcome even the most terrifying enemy. Qutuz and his warriors faced an empire that had destroyed everyone before them, and they refused to surrender. This is why we remember Ain Jalut, not just as a battle, but as the day civilization was saved by warriors who refused to give up.